Hey everybody, welcome back to your Full Tilt Tech Industry Leadership Talks podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. Today we're here with Tom Walker, the CEO of DroneUp, talking about leading by example. And I'm so excited for this show. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Don. It's great to be here.
Tom, you picked this excellent topic of leading by example, and I want to just dive right in and start there. Why did you pick that topic?
Well, I think it's interesting. You know, we talk about leadership a lot, leadership in the industry, leadership in our companies. And I think one of the things that we really push in our company is acknowledging our role as leaders in the industry and taking that seriously. And one of the things that I always say to the company when I speak to them is acknowledging leadership isn't being arrogant. It isn't being cocky. It's acknowledging a responsibility, a heavy responsibility to hold people accountable, to be willing to be held accountable, both, again, in the industry and within our company. I think it's just an important characteristic that we all need to embrace and learn and improve on all the time.
Well, I couldn't agree more, Tom. I mean, and you know, when you think about leadership, it often starts in the very beginning. So let's go back there in time and tell us a little bit about your upbringing, because oftentimes it's it's your parents, it's those teachers or coaches or other people that really form who you are, especially in terms of leadership, because they lead by example and we watch them. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The most influential person in my life growing up was my grandmother, and let me explain to you why. I grew up in a town called Camden, Arkansas. Most people haven't heard of it. It's frequently referred to in the news as the poorest city in one of the poorest states. So 50% of the folks live below the poverty level. And so we grew up very, very, very poor. Graduated from a high school class of 30, with only 37 in the class. And one of the reasons that I think my grandmother had such an important influence on me is I did not grow up realizing that I was poor. I felt like I had everything. I felt like I felt important. I felt loved. I felt cared for. It wasn't really till I left Arkansas and in the military and looked back and realized, holy cow, we didn't have anything. But she gave me the confidence, the humility, but the confidence to go out and take on the world, not realizing quite where I was coming from.
Well, I love that. Thank you for sharing that, because, you know, richness isn't just about having money, right? It's about having that love that you talked about and those people in your life that inspire you. Was there something, and by the way, I also, my grandma was like one of my favorite people in the whole. Was there a saying or something that she did that kind of stands out in your mind as you think about leading by example?
I don't know that there was any one saying. I think the thing that she always reminded me was, you know, my grandmother didn't have an education, so she wasn't, always articulate, and sometimes I think to others came across as unintelligent, which she wasn't. And so I would always, correct her language when I was in school, and I never really realized kind of how rude and insulting that was. But she would always remind me, your education isn't going to get you anywhere. And every time I would try to tell her how smart I was, her thing was, we survive on this planet by working harder than everyone else. And you don't have to be the smartest person in the world in the room. You just got to be the hardest working person in the room. She really drove that home. And I think, I left home. The first place I went after I left home was to boot camp. And I realized very quickly she was right.
Wow. Well, I think those actually are a couple of amazing sayings about working harder and not having to be that smartest person in the room. And I'll tell you, Tom, I mean, you and I share that military background. Part of my career, I was a prosecutor, and there were a lot of people that had some natural talent, but I'll tell you, and I would tell all of them that worked with me, I would take anybody any day that was willing to put the work in, because they're going to beat you every time.
Right.
So wise grandma right there. I love
That's
that.
right.
It's really a great transition to speak about your education then. So you said your class was like 37 people in this little town of Arkansas. And was that in your high school?
That was in, yeah, that was my high school class size. And it's interesting because people hear me joke a lot of times that I took on the world with my seventh grade Arkansas education. And people think that that means that I only made it through seventh grade. I actually did, and I graduated at 16, but, and graduated high school. But a couple of years later, the Arkansas schools were rated as only having a seventh grade education level at graduation. So not only did I graduate from a small school, but our schools at the time weren't very well respected in terms of their curriculum and quality.
Well, school is one piece of the pie, and clearly you had some great folks in your life. And then, as you said, you enlisted in the Navy. So, and that was right out of high school, I take it?
Right. Actually, I signed up for the Navy when I was 15. I had to go home and get my mother to sign the documents to get the waiver for me to join because I wasn't 16 yet, but I was joining on early enrollment because I was going into the nuclear power program. And I'll never forget this, and my mother actually reminded me of it a couple of years before she died. I ended up forging her signature on the document because she refused to sign it. And it wasn't until a couple of months later that she realized what I had done. And yeah, so that's how I got in the Navy. They can't do anything to me. I think the statute of limitations on that is passed.
I don't even know, but you had a long career. We're going to talk about that here, but it's so interesting because so many parents, first of all, you and I both know that less than 1% of citizens of the United States join the military. And so many parents, I think, are concerned and afraid of what that will mean for their kids, that they don't support that, like what you first experienced. So, it's great that they came around, because I think that support system and having that is really important, especially so you said you joined the nuclear forces. I mean, that's pretty significant. By the way, everybody out there, if you don't know a lot about the United States Navy, it's a pretty elite force. And when you think about the different, let's call them subcultures, no pun intended, because we're talking nukes and that's subs. um, the submarine force is uber technical and specialized. So for them to be looking at you at the age of 15 from such a little town with a air quotes seventh grade education to go into that force was, I think, a pretty significant move there. And so tell us about those early years in the United States Navy. I mean, boy, right out of high school, super young, leaving Arkansas and seeing the world.
Yeah, I went in with I kind of went in with a chip on my shoulder. I think I felt like at the time that this was my only path out of Arkansas. I joke even with folks in Arkansas today. At the time, the saying on our license plate was land of opportunity. And we used to joke the only opportunity you get is the chance to get the hell out of there. And
Mm.
so when I left and joined the Navy, I kind of, like I said, had a chip on my shoulder, and went to boot camp, finished first in my class, and really that kind of gave me this confidence level. And then I went to nuclear power school, and then I realized for the first time that you have to study. And so I had never actually studied. I didn't even know how to study. And so I really struggled the first little while in nuclear power school, just learning how to take in, they cram so much information at you, and the attrition rate in the first 6 weeks of the nuclear power training program is higher than the SEAL training program. Most people don't know that. The
Wow.
dropout rate is through the roof because people are suddenly out of high school. They're smart. They're recruiting all these people that are supposedly smart and well educated and comprehend academics well. Not always true.
Mm.
But I'll never forget one of the sayings that I learned when we were in the program and they were beating us, and we were like, "Why are you beating us up so hard? Why are we having to study 18 hours a day?" And they said, "Because we're going to take you, we're going to send you to submarines where you're going to be responsible for operating nuclear reactors." And I'll never forget this young instructor. And he said, if you want to look at it this way, when you're making a decision about whether you want to stay or go, in this program, first place is a pat on the back, second place is a kick in the crotch. So if you're willing to stay with the program, come on. Otherwise, and I remember that saying to this day when people say, what was the nuclear power program? I'm like, here's what it was like.
Yeah, it also reminds me of Talladega Nights. If you ain't first, you're last, right?
That's right,
So,
exactly.
I mean, holy shnikes. By the way, Tom, we are, and everybody out there, I think, we are live, and I want to give a shout out to Olga. Olga is with us almost every single show across every platform, including our clubhouse. So she's saying good morning to everybody. And then we have Omosugu John live from Uganda is with us here today. So thank you so much for chiming in. And everybody, keep it coming. Say hello, tell us where you're from, ask Tom some questions, and give us positive encouragement. We just love all of that. But so there you were. You come out on top in this class where people are dropping like flies. It's probably like you said that I forget what show it was. Sure, one of those movies, Tom, about the military. Where like, look to your right, look to your left. At the end of this training, one of you is not going to be here, kind of thing. And
Right.
and you kind of left. You obviously were super successful in that. It really gets back to what your grandma was saying about working harder than anybody and leading by example. So tell us about those early years in your career, because I know at some point, which is also, by the way, spoiler alert, everybody, a really big deal to jump from enlisted to the officer ranks, which Tom did. Tell us about those early years and kind of what made you transition, or what inspired you to become an officer.
Well, it's important to note that when I say work harder, I joke, I think I've actually said it to you before, that the title of my book is going to be Lucky Over Smart, because, I'm not really that bright of a guy, but I'm willing to work hard. And in the early years, the one thing I didn't tell you was the last thing that my grandmother said before I got on the bus, literally the bus. So these are the old days, to
Yep,
go to the
yep.
MEP station to go through my full enrollment. The last thing she said as the bus picked me up in front of her house is she turned around and she pointed and she said, "This is all you have to come home to." So literally, don't screw it up, right?
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
So the whole time I was in school, I remember this one guy, his name was JD, and the whole time he was talking about is, I'm going to drop out of this and go back. We got a farm, we got cars, we got this. I'm going to go do this. And he's like, "What about you?" And I'm like, "Dude, I don't have any other options, right? This has to work out."
Right,
And
right.
and so it did. I'm not going to say everything went perfectly, but I was always willing to. I was the first one there. I was the last one to leave, because I didn't really see that where there was anything else for me to do. I didn't have an education. I mean, there's not a lot of jobs operating nuclear reactors outside of the Navy at the time, right?
Right,
Um,
yeah.
and then the Seaman to Admiral program, Admiral Borda launched that he was, reinstating the Seaman to Admiral program. And so this was a chance for, you had to be an E5 or an E6. You had to have been in the Navy X amount of time. And it was an interesting program. They were basically going to send you to regular OCS, commission you as an officer. You'd go out to the fleet, and then sometime over the next period of time, you'd go finish your college degree.
Yeah.
And so 2,000 people applied, and they were going to select 50, and I was number 51.
Oh
And
my gosh. How do you even know that? Like, most people don't know like where they went. You must have known somebody maybe to like tell you that. Maybe
no,
one
no,
of
no.
your
So,
superiors.
so all I was told originally was you didn't get accepted.
Oh man.
So it was 2 weeks before the class was starting, and I was getting ready to go to my next enlisted duty assignment. I get a phone call, and they said, "Somebody dropped out. You were number 51. You're now in. You're going to OCS in 2 weeks."
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and so this was the second time. So I point this out only not to brag, but because it has to do with this chip on my shoulder. I finished boot camp number one. Now I'm going to OCS as an alternate. And when I got there the first day, the instructor, the gunny, made sure everybody knew I was an alternate. He
Are
was
you
like, "This guy,"
serious?
yeah, he basically told everybody it was just this gunnies and the Marines have an interesting way of doing things. And he said, "I want to talk to everybody who's supposed to be here and you." And so for the first 6 weeks, I was the "and you" guy. And he's like, "Okay, this is a great class, and then there's you." But the thing that he said day one, it turned out he ended up being a very influential person in my life. We remain friends to this day.
Yeah.
But one of the things that he said, which I always found interesting, and remember, this is the top 50, 2,000 people applied. This is the 50. Well,
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. Right.
50. and
Yes.
and we're all standing out there day one, and Gunny Anderson comes out in front of us and he said, "This is absolutely the worst class I will ever teach." He said, "I've calculated it. I have 264 years of bad habits that I've got to break." And it
Oh,
turned out he was right. We were all cocky. Everybody was there because they were supposedly great. And then you put us in a group and go, "You've got to act just like recruits that are day one in officer candidate school." And we
right,
were
right.
we were an awful class. We were awful at the beginning. We weren't much better at the end, but I did finish number one in that class too. Again, that's that chip on the shoulder thing. And I remember that picture that you have earlier. That was the day of graduation, and I got another one with me and my wife standing there in the gunny, and those are special pictures for us.
That's so cool. So we could pop up that picture here of Tom at his graduation. That would be great. Give kind of everybody a there he is, the young Tom, smiling. He made it, not only made it, but number one again in his class. Just unbelievable. I mean, I'm getting chills like thinking about this, how you started in this small town in Arkansas with grandma saying work harder than everybody else. You're watching her lead by example. And then you have these moments in your life where they either throw you a curveball or just kind of, really throw down the gauntlet, and this kind of alternate thing you're talking about, like you're not quite the top 50, but hey, you get the spot because somebody dropped out and we're going to make sure everybody knows that. I could see where that would be highly motivating to prove everybody wrong. And you always talk, Tom, about this chip on your shoulder. I don't really look at you that way, honestly. I think you've got the weight of the world on your shoulder sometimes with all the amazing things you're doing in DroneUp, but I don't see it as a chip. I see it as something for sure that has propelled you to work really, really hard to achieve everything you've done in life. By the way, we've got a couple more people jumping in the chat. Rotor Dynamics is saying howdy, howdy from Greenville. So howdy, howdy there, Rotor Dynamics. Thanks for jumping in. So there you are. You're now an officer in the United States Navy. And are you at this point still in the nuclear field, or did you, as an officer, transition to other duties?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story in of itself. But the one thing I want to tell you about the graduation and the gunny in this moment, and I know you probably remember this moment, during your training, but this guy had basically gone from abusing me, beating me up, calling me the alternate. In fact, I was officer candidate alternate. That was my name. That's what he actually made people call me that for the first 6 weeks or 8 weeks of OCS. But
Wow.
anyway, so at the very end of that, it gets done, and he gives you a coin and he salutes you and he says, "Congratulations, Mr. Walker." And and the Marines never laughed. They never broke character. And I said, Gunny, don't. I said, the last time somebody called me Mr. Walker, it was, "Mr. Walker, will you please step out of the vehicle?" And and in the salute line, while he was doing it, he actually lost his cool, broke character and started laughing. And I think that was kind of that was actually, I think, one of the neatest moments of the entire experience to me. But I did leave the nuclear power program. I didn't want to stay in the program. And I transitioned into the surface warfare and then ultimately over into the special operations community, where I actually had the coolest job on the planet for the last probably 8 years of my career, because I was on ships, but I was deployed overseas. I was building counterintelligence systems and computer systems and web enabling the special operations and joint forces special operations communities. It was pretty cool career at that point.
That is amazing. And for those out there that aren't familiar with the military, the special operations community is really unique. Not only are they kind of a combatant command onto themselves because they kind of cross over every single service and almost every operation, but just super hardcore in their approach. And Tom, was it during your time in special ops and that background in building, as you said, kind of these computer programs, or really getting into kind of that cyber realm, that inspired you to work with drones eventually? Or what exactly inspired you to eventually get into drones?
Um, I think at this point there were two formative things that were happening in my life throughout that early days of the career that kind of got me to where I am today. And I don't think they had anything to do with drones, but they have a lot to do with how I run the company and how I lead my company. And that was, I had spent everything in small. High school was small. Boot camp was small. Nuclear training group was small. Submarines were small. The special operation teams were small.
True.
Everything was small, small, small. I didn't really understand big. And then when I left the military and went to work with my wife and had probably the greatest pinnacle of my business career was I got to spend 20 years building a business with my wife. And it was a small company that kind of had this kind of tiger team special operations feel to it as well. It was while we were at year 18 of that business that I was walking through Best Buy and realized that for under $2,000, you could buy a piece of equipment that had more technology on it than the early space shuttle did. And so I
Yeah.
bought one.
Right.
And I'm going to confess this story to people that probably have never heard it. And I took it home, and my wife was furious with me for spending this money on this drone. And she said, well, let's go fly. Let's go to the beach. She loves to go to the beach in the evening, sit on the beach with a bottle of wine and watch the sunset. I personally have spent enough time on the ocean. I don't need to sit on the side of it and look at it for hours.
That's true in the Navy. That's true. Yeah.
I mean, I really have seen it. I've been there,
Yeah.
done that. And so she has this great idea. Why don't you take your drone? Let's go to the beach. You can fly it. I can drink a bottle of wine and I can watch you fly it. And so what a great idea. So I take it out the very first day and I crash into the ocean. I lose it.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm furious. And so I come home and I call the company the hotline that the company, and they're like, we're talking to them. And I'm like, I didn't do anything wrong. It just flew away and went into the ocean. They're like, okay, well, let's log in here and take a look at what you did. And first thing was, okay, well, you're flying after dark and actually near an Air Force base, but none of my business what you're doing. And let's look at the stick movement just before. And I went, never mind, and hung up. And it was at that moment that I realized the technical capabilities of these platforms. And I say this, and people think that this is just kind of pie in the sky saying, but I really, really mean it. At that moment, I knew that drones were going to fundamentally have a big fundamental impact on society, good or bad. And that day, I made the decision, we're going to start a company and we're going to make that impact as positive as possible. And that's really the day. The next day is when I called John Vernon, our CTO, and said, hey, let's do this thing. And that's how the company got started.
Oh my gosh, that's a great story. I didn't know it. So what you said you were running a company with your wife for like 20 years?
Yeah, software company. I mean, when I got out of the Navy, I didn't really have any experience doing anything except Navy stuff.
Right.
And I didn't really want to go be a Navy contractor. That's what a lot of people did. I could have gone back into contracting on the special operations side and probably been deployed overseas, which was the exact reason I got out. So I wanted to spend time with my wife and our kids. And so I went to work for her, and that temporarily until we figured out what we were going to do, and that temporary turned into nearly 20 years.
Wow, that's amazing. And when you think about drones, they're flying computers, right? So to have that kind of background, so there you were, you decided, I'm just going to create this company. I think I know the origin of your name, DroneUp, but why don't you share that story with us? How did you land on the name?
Yeah, so it wasn't really originally DroneUp. It was originally DART, Drone Assisted Response Team. We were going to build a proprietary platform that we could rapidly deploy volunteer drone operators for whatever situation. That was the original one. Company was all lined up. We had a website. We were going live on Monday. Sunday morning at 7:00, I get a phone call from my CIO, and he says, "Did you see Shark Tank last night?" And I was like, "No." And he said, "Yeah, well, Mark Cuban just invested a significant amount of money into a drone company called DART." And we were like, holy hell, there's not even that many drone companies. What are the odds that have two with the same name? And so we had an emergency meeting in the office on a Sunday afternoon, and we sat around on a big whiteboard and we threw names up, and somebody threw up DroneUp. And we went, oh, that's kind of cool. It can be a noun, drone up. It could be a verb. We got to go drone up. Um, it could be used a bunch of different ways. Okay, we'll use that for 90 days until we come up with a new name. And 90 days later, the marketing guys came back and they had a bunch of names and none of them stood up. So we just kept drone up.
Yeah, I love that. So fun fact, everybody, I got to see Tom's team in action in the earlier days out in Walmart in around Las Vegas, Nevada. And I just remember when your folks were prepping that drone and then getting ready to fly it. It's like a safety thing. They all said, drone up. And I was like, this is so cool. And so when I just got my Part 107 license, they're training us on what to say. And I'm thinking, no, I think I'm just going to say drone up. I just like that. It's really good. So I think we have a
And,
really
and,
cool.
and by the way, 3 years later, if you were just out, I don't know if you're going to talk about this, but you were just
Yeah.
down in Arkansas and saw our operation. And to this day, the formal comms procedure is when the drone is up over the radio, they say drone up.
Yeah.
We still do that today.
I love that. We are definitely going to talk about that. But before we do, I'd love to show that picture of Tom with his colleague there out in front of the drone up combat. There we go. So I know this was some of the early days. And Tom, as I think about drone up, I know this is your old logo. You've since rebranded. You really started, at least in my memory, in the industry with being kind of this network, if you will, a national network of drone service providers where people would kind of sign up because they already have their license, and you had contracts across the whole United States with all of these different state level or municipality level folks. You push out the jobs and folks would sign up. So that was your initial model, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, it was exactly that. It was you could download the app, put in your credentials, and we would deploy you. And we still do. There's over 55,000 operators registered in that network worldwide now. And we still do that. But in 2019, when we were given the opportunity, and I appreciate. I didn't remember that you had the opportunity to visit the North Las Vegas operation, but it's so cool to see where we've come, both on the network, drone services side, but certainly on the delivery side in a short period of time. You remember using Inspire 2s with fishing line releases,
Yep.
and it was sloppy, but it worked.
No, it definitely proved out the concept. But speaking of proving out concepts and tying back to your theme of leading by example, I remember, Tom, when I interviewed you pretty early on for a commercial UAV piece on drone delivery. And at this juncture, it was a Virginia campus. What was the name of the school?
Lawrenceville.
Uh, what was it?
No, you talking about where we did the COVID test delivery?
You did a really interesting kind of R&D piece, and then you put out a white paper that was completely transparent, by the way, very rare, on your findings. About here's some things that worked when we try to do drone delivery on. It was a campus that was shut down for a period of
Right, that was in
time.
Lawrenceville. It was an old campus, an old college campus, been shut down for years, but it was a perfect environment for us to kind of simulate this small city without having to worry about flying over anybody because there was nobody there to fly over. Yeah. And
Yeah,
the
and
white paper that we published is still out there on the internet. It's called Operation Last Mile. And you're right. A lot of people really beat us up for the things that we put in there because they said this is going to hurt the industry, the acknowledgement of the weaknesses and the challenges and the crashes and everything. And turns out I think it did quite the opposite.
no, I think so. And so kind of getting back to what I was, saying of leading by example, when I think about that, I remember when I interviewed you, Tom, and the quote you gave me, I'll never forget it was, "We run headfirst into the regulations." And as a lawyer, and someone that is a fan of this industry, I love that you said that because those initial flights were under Part 107, which some people, their heads were exploding. How's DroneUp doing this under 107? It's just like, well, no, like there's some gray here. We're gonna operate within that gray in a safe manner. We're gonna be transparent with the FAA about it, because not everybody needs to wedge themselves into Part 135, for drone delivery. And so when I think about leading by example, I think about that quote you gave me, and that, by the way, that article is also still out there on the commercial UAV news. I think it was called Drones Delivering the Goods. And, Tom was really kind of the main person I interviewed for that because frankly, you were leading by the example. You were one of the first ones out there doing stuff when it comes to drone delivery. And then you got involved in the Walmart, and this other R&D proving out drone delivery over time. So many things, and we're going to get to today here in a second where the company is now. But before we do that, as you look back on your journey, whether it was, your time in the Navy or the early years in DroneUp when you're just creating this network of pilots or proving out new concepts, do you have advice for young entrepreneurs or, maybe somebody like you that's out there listening that's coming from a small town? What would you tell them, as some of the lessons that you learned over your life that they could also learn from?
The number one thing that I preach to my staff, whether they're our senior staff or their junior staff, first day on the thing, or when I talk to students at schools, I'm actually getting ready to give my first commencement speech in a few weeks. I've never been more nervous about a talk than this one, right? But the main message is humility, right? Because at the end of the day, if the moment that you get cocky, the moment that you think you're something special, that is when that drives and creates complacency and the ability, you start ignoring the little things, right? One of the sayings that you've heard me say, my team gets so annoyed by saying it, but I learned it in the military, is one aw shit wipes out 99 attaboys. And so many times what I hear is, well, things are going to go wrong. Things are going to happen. And I say, yeah, I acknowledge that. And people will not measure us by what goes wrong, but by how we respond and react to what goes wrong. But let's back up to the whole statement, that original premise, that assumption that things will go wrong. Let's start with doing everything in our power. Put safety first, safety over revenues, a culture of safety, a culture of people first. One of the sayings that I say to everybody the first day they start with the company, the first time I have an opportunity to talk to them, is be proud but not arrogant, confident but not cocky, and don't tell others how you're better. Tell them how you're different. Let them decide if it's better. It's really just to continually pushing. That's why you'll never hear us say we're the biggest, we're the best, we're the number one, we're the top. We don't say that. We articulate how we're different. We're transparent with the community, with the industry, and with the FAA. And we think that humility, that transparency, and that care and compassion for our people and our industry is what makes us just a little bit special.
Well, I would agree. And I think the transparency is one key way that you are leading by example. And, Shannon Knutson agrees. He's out there. Shannon's with Parallel Flight, by the way, if you don't know about them. He's saying, Tom, I love the transparency while developing the tech. Any advice for startups balancing transparency with strategic messaging? And does it vary between DoD and private customers? I guess this idea of transparency.
Yeah, one of the things that's a challenge in our industry, and I only speak to our industry because I always tell people I'll never know another person's industry as well as they do. I can only know my industry. Is this balance between there's an article that came out the other day in Wired magazine, and somebody, the guy that interviewed me for the magazine, said, so he was asking me about all the competitors and what's going on with them. I said, look, we keep an eye on the competitors because we have to. There's a responsibility to do so. But I have no comment on competitors. It's not in our best interest. We're all trying to move this industry forward. And he said, but they're having crashes. And I said, we have crashes. And I think it caught him off guard. And he said, wait a minute, I've never heard of a crash. And I'm like, well, I promise you, there's nobody in our industry that's innovating and building aerial flying robots that hasn't had crashes, right?
Right.
You hear about some because they're the big names in the industry. You hear about it sometimes because people are transparent. But if you ask me if we've had crashes, I'm going to tell you the truth. Now, I'm not going to go out on social media and say, guess what happened today? We had well, no, we're not going to do that, right?
Right.
But the other challenge is, especially in the startup world, is you see a lot of companies that market what's coming. We're building this tech and it's going to be really cool, coming out spring of 2024.
A lot of promises.
Well, a lot of promises, and people sometimes get aggravated with that. But sometimes, if you're raising money, you're starting a business, you're trying to build a pipeline for a product that's going to be ready in 18 to 24 months, you
Right.
have to do that.
Right.
The problem with doing that, though, in my opinion, is if you're leading the industry and you're continually signaling what's coming 2 years from now, then you're losing a tactical advantage that you have. So it's a delicate balance between being able to reach a point in the industry where you don't want to share and don't need to share your future tech, or be transparent. In our case now, we're transparent about our operations. This, we've talked about this. We briefed the FAA to the point that the FAA has literally said to me multiple times, Tom, you're telling us more than you need to tell us. And my
Right.
answer is, that's fine. Because when you, as the FAA, hear that something went wrong or something happened, you're going to know that if you've heard it from somebody else before you heard it from us, it probably isn't true. And
Right.
so that's that advantage. But in terms of being able to kind of future voice your technology because you're a startup, and then being confident about the failures, or transparent about the failures along the way, that's a decision every operator has to make, because it's a tough balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, balancing that innovation with humility, Chris Waters is out there saying innovation, humility is everything. So thanks, Chris, for dropping that, and Shannon for those comments. Keep them coming, everybody. We love that. We have a couple more pictures that I want to make sure we show, but you pinged on a word, balance, and we're going to get to that here in a second, Tom. So if we could roll these pictures of Tom here. I think another one is, here we go. I remember when I asked you about this, Tom, you're like, this is me trying to convince people drones are really a thing. Like, they're actually going to be important. And, it's kind of funny because I think in some regard, we're all still in some respects trying to do that.
Yeah,
So I love that picture of you with the military hand gesture there,
that's
and
right.
yeah, yeah, of course,
You
of
thought
course.
you thought I was in the Air Force. That looks like an Air Force person
It,
giving a
it
power.
does. It's like, hello. So, all right. And then the next one, I think it's more recent. There we go. This is now your new offices, right? So tell us about that. And by the way, that's the Mandalorian. For those that don't know, I am the way. So tell us about this one.
Yeah, they picked this picture just because, we one of the things that makes our company so cool, and what makes it so much fun to go to work, is that the people who work there are intelligent, creative. Again, I'll come back to humble. I mean, you don't survive at our company with unless you're humble, and everybody's kind of on an equal playing field. Um, but I like this one. This is in our new office, and this was the Halloween party, and it just demonstrated some of the cool creative. That's actually one of our staff members, and he made that from
What?
scratch.
Are you kidding me? I'm like,
No,
so I'm so into Halloween, by the way. And I love that he made that. That's incredible that one of your folks made that costume. That's amazing. And by the way, Daniel Wyndham is out there saying great discussion so far, and Shannon saying great answer and insights. Thank you. Uh, Fun fact, Tom, you'll love this. When I was at the Air Force Academy as the head lawyer there, still in uniform, every Halloween we did this thing that I just kind of coined reverse trick or treating. So we would all the lawyers, we would all dress up, we'd pick the theme, and we would go around giving out candy to people. So it was reverse trick or treating. Instead of asking people for candy, we were giving it out. And there we were walking across the terrazzo. One year we all said we're just going to be superheroes. And so you had, like, Thor and, Superman and Spider-Man. I was, of course, had to be Wonder Woman, walking around campus giving the cadets and all the staff members candy. It was super fun. So
that's awesome.
I love that you guys dress up for Halloween. I got to come out sometime. That's so cool. So you talked about balance, and I knew our time was going to fly and get short. And we cannot end this episode, Tom, without talking about that. But before we do, I also can't end this episode without talking about how far that DroneUp has come. So what Tom had mentioned earlier is I had the privilege, really, to go out to Bentonville, Arkansas, to Walmart store number 100, and see DroneUp in action in their delivery. It's going to be part of a PBS special that's going to come out, I believe, this fall. start on Rocky Mountain PBS and then get nationally syndicated. But it's on drones and eVTOLs, and DroneUp is one of the companies that we're featuring there. And you're right, from a van with a tent and fishing line in a parking lot in North Las Vegas to I guess you call it the drone hub, your kind of infrastructure that you've built. It's a 2-story building with a really cool hydraulic lift that has the RPIC in it to watch that drone fly once you say drone up. What an amazing journey. So tell us a little bit about where you are right now and how you feel DroneUp continues leading by example. And then I want to hit our balance topic for the end.
Yeah, we are very, very excited about the progress that we've made, but I don't just mean we, I mean we as an industry. One of the things that we want to do is we want to help the industry win. This isn't about DroneUp winning. This isn't about, proving what we can do with drones. We think that every time we get it right, it's good for the industry. One of the things that we tell our staff, again, you keep hearing these sayings we teach everybody all the time, but one of the things that we teach our staff all the time is decision making is easy. When you're making a decision, the order goes like this: what's best for our people, what's best for our brand, and what's best for our industry. And make every decision in that order, right? And so that's what we've tried to do, both with our culture of safety. If you were at the hub, you saw it. There's a sign that says safety over revenues, safety over revenue. It's revenues come way, 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 way after safety, because we believe that anything we do wrong will not just hurt our brand, it will not just hurt our customers' brand, but it hurts the industry. Similarly, everything that we get right has that same effect. And I think that we've got more right than we've got wrong, and we're going to continue to try to do that.
That's awesome. So it looks like there's something about a personal message in an email, which, by the way, everybody, I can't access my emails while I'm doing the show. So if you've got something, drop it in the chat. I'll try to ask it. And if I don't get to your questions, but you want to reach out to Tom, we'll make sure that we give you his contact information before we sign off. But I want to talk about balance, Tom, because that is a word that you used earlier. It's one of those things that's so elusive in so many people's lives, especially someone that is leading by example in the industry, in their company, in their communities, which I know you are doing as well. So let's put up that picture of Tom and his wife, and tell me, how do you do it? How do you try to maintain balance?
I wish I were better. I'm not. I tend to get bogged down, but I've been fortunate with my wife in the fact that we've worked together for 25 years now. We worked in the company together. We used to joke that our board meetings were in the bedroom. And we talk about how we got our MBAs working together. She knows she has a higher work ethic than I do. So as hard as I work, I'm still trying to catch up to her. And now this really is still a mutual. She sold her company a couple of years ago, but she still travels with me. She's around me, continuously. I talk business with her more than I do anyone. So I have a little bit of an advantage there, you know what I mean, over others. But if you want to say how I keep balance, it's actually not me that does it. My wife has a really surly habit of scheduling trips that we go places where there's no cell phone coverage. And it's true. And for the first couple of days, I have withdrawals. My hands are shaking. I'm sweating. But then, we enjoy the time away, and then I get back and realize the world didn't burn to the ground while I was not able to respond to text in 30 seconds.
No, that's so important to realize that kind of we're all fungible, right? That's one thing I learned in the military. We're all replaceable, and
Right.
just not taking yourself too seriously. That picture, everybody, by the way, was from one of these excursions Tom had with his wife as part of their 30th anniversary tour. So happy anniversary, Tom, to you and your wife. That's amazing. I mean, I think it speaks volumes to your marriage that you can work together, because what do they say? Don't do business with friends or family. And there you were for like over 25 years, like in this together. That's super cool. So we are literally at our 45-minute mark, but we're not going to end without our quick lightning round. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions, really super quick answers. Number 1, favorite book.
Critical Chain, Eli Goldratt.
Okay. Number 2, hero.
My wife.
And number 3, the one leadership tip you want to leave with others as you sign off today.
Look, no matter how strong a leader you are, or no matter how strong you are, strength without humility is just a weapon. But strength with humility is the ability to hold others accountable, hold yourself accountable, and get things done.
All right. Well, very good. Thanks, Tom, for taking this time with us and for continuing to lead by example. Everybody in the chat and everybody out there, thanks so much for watching. That's all she wrote, and we are out here.